everyone, it's Jessica. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited for this month's mystery envelope, which was sent out by my friend Lori because she sent a really great one. We've got a piece of periwinkle cardstock here and a little piece of pattern paper from the current March and April mix-in pack, some shimmer trim, and then this awesome piece of twine that perfectly matches the Seedless color. She said she just had it in her stash, but it really does color coordinate. And the rule for this month is just one. We have to do some kind of mixed media technique that is new to us. So mixed media to me, I automatically think of Distress Oxide inks. So I've gone ahead and pulled a couple of colors, and let me show you what I'm thinking here. I've got this one 4x6 photo, just the one picture from Mother's Day a few years ago. And I think I'm going to modify this pattern here. It's pattern number 1 from the Make It From Your Heart Volume 6 pattern book. And I'm going to pull in a little bit more of that pattern paper from the same mixing collection. So I'm going to do another piece of periwinkle to go along with what she sent me. And I think that'll work nicely. And then I also thought it would be fun to bring in mulberry because you can see a little bit of the headband that I've got on in my hair, and it does have that same kind of color. And so I thought that that was a really fun pop, different from the blues and the greens, and those all work really nicely together. So that's why I pulled these particular Distress Oxide inks. I was thinking the Seedless Preserves works really well with mulberry, and then I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a different color, so I've got 2 different options there that might go along with Seedless. So according to the pattern, I need a couple of 3x3 squares so that I can build my grid format. So it works perfectly. The piece that Lori sent, I can get 2 of my 3 squares right here from this piece, and then I'm going to actually pull in my own stash of some of that pattern paper just so I can cut a little bit smarter rather than, just getting one piece out of that little square that she sent. But I'm going to use the same pattern paper plus a few more that coordinate. Now, I wasn't sure exactly what technique I wanted to try that I hadn't done before, but I knew something with Distress Oxide. So my thought was, this is just my little test and practice. I'm going to blend on some of that Seedless Preserve color, and then I'm going to come over it with a stencil and my clear shimmer brush because Distress Oxide ink does react with water or anything that is wet, which does help to remove the color. And normally it's a really fun effect. And I thought, well, I guess if you went over, a stencil with a shimmer brush, then it would probably do that. But I really didn't like this for a couple of reasons. 1, it looked like a hot mess. And 2, it was leaving some color on my clear shimmer brush. And I didn't want to waste a bunch of that shimmer by squeezing it out to clear it out. So I'm going to scratch that idea. And instead, I'm going to try something different. So I'm going to grab, I just have this stamp set here sitting on my desk. I've been participating in the Close to My Heart March album retreat, and this was an exclusive stamp set that we got. I have it sitting on my desk, and I'm just looking for a little pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp that pattern there with the Seedless Preserves. And because Distress Oxide ink is more of like a pigment ink, it does take a little bit longer to dry. And so I'm going to grab this dry cloth here, and right after I stamp it, I'm just going to rub over the top of my stamped image. And what it's going to do is it's going to kind of blur or smear that image just a little bit. I really wish the camera would do a better job of picking up on this because you can see it much better in person, and it really is a cool effect. Now, I have not done this before, and that was Lori's rule for this mystery envelope, was to do something with mixed media that we've never tried before. And I really like this, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do it with that Seedless Preserves ink on top of my mulberry squares that I'm going to use for my layout. Now, I did recently see this particular technique on a Juliana Michaels video that I was watching, and I thought that it looked really cool. So it was perfect timing. Thank you, Lori, for your mystery envelope, because when I watched that video, I knew I wanted to try it, and this was the perfect chance to test it out. All right, while I have my all-purpose mat out, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of embossing. I'm going to spritz my cardstock very lightly with water before I put it through the embossing folder. Normally, I kind of like that white core to poke through after I emboss something, but on this particular layout, I want to keep it all that periwinkle color. So just by giving your cardstock a light spritz, and if you send it through, it'll help to prevent any of that paper from cracking and the white core showing. So I've gone ahead and put my grid together, and then I am going to build this layout on a piece of Seedless cardstock. I've gutted out the center there because a lot of that is not going to show, and I am normally pretty thrifty with my cardstock anyway, but after the news of Close to My Heart's closing, I think I'm going to be extra thrifty. So I did mat my photo on some sapphire cardstock. And then the way that I like to create is to kind of have my pieces prepared ahead of time so that way I can play around with where they're going to go on the page. So I went ahead and cut out a couple of letters for a title here. It's going to say My Loves. I used that outlined alphabet thin cut, and I just used the inner part of the letters. And then I have cut out a whole bunch of different shapes from the decorative shapes thin cuts. This particular circle here is actually left over from another project. I didn't stamp it very well, but it does have some periwinkle stamping over top of it. I thought maybe I could tuck it and just show the part that did stamp okay. And then I've got a whole bunch of other shapes like that scallop square and some flowers. And then I did cut some leaves out in both Seedless color and sapphire. And you can see here, that's what I used. I'm just going to spend some time moving stuff around and playing. Now those flowers were looking a little plain to me, so I grabbed a stamp off of that same stamp set. But if you don't have this one, any kind of background stamp or pattern will work. And I'm going to go ahead and do that same technique that I did with the Distress Oxide ink because now that I've tried it, I'm a little bit obsessed and I think it's a lot of fun. So I'm using some Post-it notes just to mask off each of the individual petals on my flower, and then I'm going to stamp over the top of them with that Seedless Preserves Distress Oxide ink, and then I'm going to smear them just to give my petals a little something extra. Now, I should have picked a better stamp because this particular one, being such a rectangle shape, I couldn't really bend it to match the curve of the inner circle of the flower. And by the time I am done going around all of the petals, you can kind of see where the edges of that stamp were. So I don't really end up particularly loving this flower. So I went back digging through my stash and I found an old stamp of the month. I think it was called Doodle Borders. And there were a couple of dots on there, and that worked a little bit better. So I did the exact same technique, but you can see here what that one looks like with that grid pattern. So again, I did the same technique, but I just used a different stamp that has dots instead. And I didn't waste that first flower. I actually glued it behind one of those other ones so that it's stacked up 2 die cuts thick. All right, another idea I had was to make my own flower out of some of those leaves. So I actually used that same Distress Oxide color and blended a little bit onto a piece of paper, and then I cut some of the leaves out. I thought I could get away with 5 leaves for a flower, but it actually turned out that I needed 6, and I was a little too lazy to blend a little bit more ink onto paper, cut another leaf out. So I thought, all right, if I end up using this little flower that I've created, it's going to get tucked behind something. That way you can't see where the missing petal is. And I wasn't entirely sure I was even going to use it just because it was so much darker. And I thought I'm not going to go to all that trouble until I know exactly how that's going to go. So I'm going to set that to the side for the moment. I did mount my title on a piece of Seedless cardstock just to kind of make it stand out a little bit more. But this is about where I start doing all of the moving around and trying things out. I knew that I wanted a flower in that bottom right-hand corner, and that the title went up there across the top 3 squares. And then after that, it was really kind of a big question mark. So I'm going to cut that one stamped circle in half and kind of play around with where that might go. I leave it up there for a while, but it does end up kind of turning the corner and moving over to the left-hand side of the page instead. And I like that white scalloped square behind the corner of my photo. I feel like between the flower in the bottom right and that scallop circle in the top left, they kind of help to frame the picture in, even more so than that grid pattern already is. And then these sapphire leaves are going to be leaves tucked behind my flowers that I have stamped. And even though that other stamp, the dotted one, worked a little bit better, I actually grabbed a circle and just kind of set it over the top. You can see here what it looked like originally. I really like the look of that circle layered over the top of it, and it does kind of help to hide any of the little imperfections in my stamping. So I think I'm going to do that. But then I had a mulberry circle, and I popped that over the center, and I liked that even better. So I'm going to just build a little mulberry flower that way. I do like that about this thin cut set, is it's really easy to kind of build and, mix and match. The leaves can be leaves, or you can turn the leaves into a flower. Just make sure you cut 6 petals. And I used one of the little flowers to be the center of that one. And I decided I'm going to go ahead and use it. At first, like I said, I was worried I was going to need more of that Seedless Preserves color, but I think there's enough in my mulberry squares that it just kind of evens itself out. Okay, I want to make my title popped up just a little bit, but I have been going through a lot of foam tape lately, and I'm getting a little nervous about my supply. So this is something that I like to do. Like I said, I tend to be quite thrifty in my craft room. So I save all of my little scrap pieces of white daisy paper. It doesn't matter how small they are, but they are really good for kind of gluing behind things and just layering up some dimension that way. So that's how I popped up my title. Then I still had this piece of shimmer trim that came in the envelope, and so I'm going to cut it in half so that I can put a little bit behind the bottom of my photo and then tuck a little bit behind the top of my photo, and I think that turned out really pretty. I do love all of the pieces that you sent in the envelope, Lori. Thank you. This was a lot of fun to create. I really enjoyed this month's envelope. And I've gone ahead and glued the things down. You can see here how it's all coming together. I added a couple of Seabrook flowers as well from that same thin cut set. And there you can see where I moved that little circle over to the left-hand side. And then I had that twine that she sent still sitting on my desk. So I tied a little bow and I kind of moved it around a little bit, but I decided on down here underneath that bottom flower. And I'll just grab my glue dots, and I was pretty generous with them because I am gluing it right over top of that little piece of shimmer trim, and glitter paper sometimes doesn't really stick very well to other things. So I was really generous with the glue dots, stuck the bow down there. And then I still had a couple of mulberry flowers, the tiny ones, and so I put them up above my title, and that's about it for gluing things down. Later off camera, I am going to come in with a couple of clear sparkles and scatter those around. But other than that, that's it for the embellishments. I kind of play around with these leaves. I'm like, do I want more? I felt like I needed more, something more. And then it came to me, maybe I could go around that square with like maybe some stitched lines or something like that. I do have my white gel pen sitting right here, but so that might be kind of fun. But then I thought maybe the white was too white and it was really kind of a light background. So maybe I should bring in some more of that sapphire color. So off camera, because I did have to get my head right over it. I didn't want to mess anything up at this point. I did grab a little border stamp and I just stamped some sapphire circles all the way around that square. And I think that was definitely that final finishing touch that it needed. And that was pretty much it. So like I said, thank you for joining me for this month's mystery envelope. Make sure that you go down to the description box to check out the links for the other ladies to see what they created with the exact same pieces that Lori sent and the same rules. Although I guess maybe they didn't use the same pieces because she said we didn't have to. We just had to do a new mixed media technique. So that was a lot of fun. All right, thanks for joining me today. I hope you guys are having a great one, and I will see you next time. Happy crafting. Bye.